Good morning and welcome. You're listening live to Heart-to-Heart, a program which aims to help you understand and to become your loving self. I'm Dr. Mitra Rashidian. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified sexologist in private practice in beautiful Encino, California.
California. And I'm Dr. Robert Jaffe. I am also,
You are?
I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified hypnotherapist. And I'm here with Dr. Rashidian to share with you some of what we've learned over many years of study and practice. The goal of which is to feel more loving and joyful every day of our lives. We always dedicate this program to you, our listeners, and we are here to let you know that you do contain within you everything you need to feel happy, joyous, and free. We believe that we are born into this world as our loving, authentic, true selves, and we come in open, curious, honest, sexual, and trusting. And we also have the capacity to be calm, emotionally available, and connected with others, as well as confident and compassionate.
Thank you, Dr. Jaffe. We would like to invite you to call us, share us your perspectives, ask your questions, give us your comments, because without knowing those, this show is not going to happen. It is your participations and the energy that you're going to give us every time we have the program that's going to give us the energy and the motivation to go forward, and also responding to what you really need to hear from us. So please call us at 951-922-3532 live on the show. You can also watch us on our YouTube at heart-to-heart-online/YouTube. So we yesterday also had our very first program on Thursday at 3 p.m., which was about what I call it so far is Sexology 101, where we talk about everything about sexual relationships and what can give us, a joyful sex life and a joyful relationship as a result. And today, of course, we are talking about different aspects of life, which is about addictions and trauma and ego and all of that. So both programs really reflecting on the areas that people most struggle with. And our aim is to be able to make it easier on you and make it easier on those that you love in your life. So please call us 951-922-3532. So Dr. Jaffe, here we are.
Here we are.
Okay, I'm still excited about last night's program. I still have that energy in me.
And I wanted to just let everybody know that our Thursday program is on now every Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. on this channel.
Right, exactly. So, all right. So today is today. Today belongs to our today's topic.
Yes.
Right, which is addictions and trauma and lose your ego, find yourself.
Right. And so that is our slogan for all our work, really.
Right. Yes.
Is lose your ego, find yourself. And what we mean by that is there are ego-based values and there are spirit-based values. And ego-based values are most of the way the world runs. So what does the world value? Well, for the most part, the world values money and power. And so anything that was related to money and power are all ego-based values. Now, is that wrong? No, of course not, because we are human beings and we all have egos and we all want money and we all want power. Some of us want to be empowered and have power over ourselves and over our lives and affect the world in a powerful, joyous, loving way. And some of us want to have power and don't care about others too much, but are just looking for power in order to feel powerful.
Exactly.
So that's the ego. The spirit doesn't really care too much about power and money. The spirit cares about love. The spirit cares about connection with others. The spirit cares about kindness. The spirit cares about gentleness. The spirit cares about appreciation and gratitude. And so we have a choice at any moment which part of us we're paying attention to and which part of us we are operating from.
Exactly.
So that's part of what we're going to be talking about in this program. In this program, we're also going to be talking, as you mentioned, about addictions and about trauma. And one thing about addictions is that it's interesting because people who have addictions, I believe, are struggling to get out of their ego and into their spirit. And so what they're wanting to do is they're wanting to let go of their problems, their ego-based problems, and they're wanting to feel freer.
Right. So let's identify what are some of the ego-based problems here.
Right.
Right.
So
go ahead.
Oh, please. Well, yeah. So an ego-based problem is anything that has to do with survival. Mm-hmm. And that begins in childhood, where we are totally dependent on our caregivers, hopefully our parents. And so I'll just say our parents, because that's true for most of us, although some people were raised by others. But I'll say if our parents or parent figures, we can just say that.
Caregivers altogether.
Or caregiver, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if they are people who have learned how to be kind and to be loving and to be gentle, and they impart those things to us and they treat us in that way, we feel safe in the world. And when we feel safe, then we are free to be our authentic, true selves. We're free to be creative. We're free to say no. We're free to say, I love you. And we're also free to say, I hate you. And all children, as all individuals, have all those feelings. Mm-hmm. At sometimes we hate somebody. And usually if we feel that way and we're free to say it, if the other person doesn't overwhelm us with their own feelings and their own anger and try to punish us, in which case we learn that it's not nice to say I hate you, or it's not safe to say I hate you, then we hold that hate in, that hateful feeling, and that becomes problematic for us, because any feeling that we hold in and we repress stays locked inside our subconscious mind and has a negative effect on us and often others. So saying I hate you to your parent, if your parent is wise and loving, your parent will say, oh, well, tell me more. What do you hate? Why do you hate me? Mm-hmm. And then the child, depending on the child's age, will express it. And the parent, if the parent is wise and loving, will say, oh, okay, I get it. So you really hate that I do this, or you hate it when I do that. And it's really not about hating the parent. It's about hating their behavior usually, or hating the fact that they're making them go to bed at 8 o'clock, or hating the fact that they can't watch television, or whatever it is. And the parent will just acknowledge that. Okay, you hate that. I get it. And if I were you, I would hate it also. And here's why I'm saying that, and here's why it's important to do that. So so you can acknowledge the feeling. It doesn't mean you have to give in to the child's desire at that moment, but you can acknowledge it, and you don't have to crush the child's spirit by saying, well, I love you, trying to guilt the child into feeling bad about the fact that they hate you. You can just say, I get it, and if I were you, I would probably feel that way too. And here's what it is.
Well, this is, such a nice intervention, such a nice approach. Only if, the parents themselves are not operating based on their ego situation.
Correct.
Right. So we see that in the majority of the time when we have a problem within families and they come to you or to myself, we see that parental communication style significantly is a contributing factor to adult addictions or even to teenager addictions. Right.
It certainly has yeah, definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
So then it's not just the child when we are growing up as children. It's not just us knowing, what's going on, but it's the parents actually where they are, whether they are on ego-based functioning or whether they are in a spiritual-based functioning or whether they are in between both. Right? Because sometimes we have, caregivers who function in between both. They have a tendency more towards spirituality, or they have a tendency more towards ego-based functioning. So it's basically we have to look at ourselves as grown-ups to see, how much of what we have today we borrowed it from our caregivers, and then what do we want to do with it, right? Kind of ask this question of ourselves. I know that I'm unhappy in my life, right? I know that I don't want to have addiction. I know that so many things that I like and I don't like, I can't make sense of why I like them and why I don't like them. So there is, I think, one thing that we need to ask ourselves as grown-ups is really what's in it for me that I'm holding on to this kind of a behavior that at the end of the day, they make me unhappy. And they, kind of push me towards addictive behavior so I can numb myself so that I don't feel my pain. And then again, the next day I start all over again with the same process.
Right. So, yeah. So a couple of things. One, you mentioned that the parent's communication style affects the child's ability to cope and perhaps influences them becoming an addict.
Well, I'm not just talking about verbal communication. I'm talking about also behaviors that they demonstrate, right?
Right.
Because as children, prime teachers in their lives are their parents.
Right.
And elder siblings, obviously.
Right.
Yes.
So I don't want us to give the impression that it's the parent's fault that the child is an addict.
Well, that's one aspect of it.
Well, that what I want to say is that the parents have a part in whether the child is happy or unhappy.
Right.
And the child then may choose an addiction in order to cope with the unhappiness. I'm going to say it that way.
So I tell you what, I just got a notice about commercial break.
Another a commercial break
already.
Let's
continue. Yeah, I mean, can you believe the time goes so fast? So once we come back, let's open up this discussion at a deeper level about it.
Let's go a little deeper. Okay.
Okay. Looking forward to talking to you in 3 minutes.
Okay. Talk to you soon.
Hello and welcome. Welcome back. Dr. Mitra and Dr. Robert here at Heart-to-Heart, Lose Your Ego, Find Yourself. We are here talking about the root causes of addictions. And so far we are talking about parental style of communication. And, we like to hear from you. So please call us 951-922-3532. If you're suffering from any form of addiction, share with us. What do you think was a contributing factor for you? Because then that helps us to open the conversation at the level that you need to hear about and you want to hear about. Or, those that you believe that they can benefit from this program, please give them the information so they can join us and we can help so many people, even from a distance. So 951-922-3532. So Dr. Robert, we were talking about let's not accuse parents, right? Well, we're not accusing parents, but we're saying that unknowingly many of our behaviors can cause discomfort in children, and then they don't have a way of coping with it. So that's one way that happens, right?
Yeah, it is. And And so what we talked about at the very beginning, you said that we're going to be talking about addiction and trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what we want to say right now is a little bit what the connection is. And trauma is a break in the feeling of safety that people walk around with. And so it doesn't take a lot to traumatize somebody who is weak and defenseless. And that's the way every child is when they're born. And at age 1, at age 2, at age 5, at age 7, they're weak and defenseless. So it doesn't take a lot to traumatize them. And so parents have to be, parents, and I'm going to use the parents and caregivers, have to be very mindful of how they're communicating with their child, because it's very easy for the child to get frightened. Mm-hmm. Especially since the child knows that they are totally dependent on the parents. They're dependent on the parents' goodwill, and that they can't survive without the parents' goodwill. And that's something that we need to really understand, as you said at the break, at a deeper level, mm-hmm. because parents often are careless, or they're imitating how they were brought up, and not recognizing that the way they were brought up, even though they may have survived it, wasn't especially helpful in terms of them feeling safe and learning how to have a lot of self-love, as well as loving others. The goal really is to help your child create self-love, mm-hmm. so that they can begin to trust themselves and be authentic. And that means that if they're authentic, then they can say pretty much whatever they want to say. And if it's offensive to us, then we can say, "Ouch," or or "that hurt my feelings," and let the child know. But that's different than telling the child that they're wrong or bad, or yelling at the child, or worse yet, even slapping the child. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people still believe that in the old adage, spare the rod, spoil the child, which is the old-fashioned way of disciplining, which we now know through modern psychology. Certainly over the last 50 years, we've discovered that actually traumatizes children rather than empowers them.
Right. You mentioned a magical word. To me, that's a magical word for every child, and that's the sense of safety.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So when we're talking about also trauma necessarily is not just limited to physical and emotional abuse, or is not limited to the hard disciplines or anything like that. So for a child as an infant, I have read a few articles that how giving the child the sense of safety within the first 2 years of life is essential, mm-hmm. right? So let's see one way that's really big, and many parents may not recognize that. But it's a big deal really, is to how do we give the sense of safety to a child during the first 2 years so that they don't feel traumatized, because children at that age actually can become traumatized. So the key is to, when we are having an infant for the first 2 years, to give them a sense of safety by not changing anything in their environment. So by that, I mean, well, when we have a newborn child, everybody wants to see the child. Grandparents wants to see the child if they are living in a distance. Aunts and uncles, they want to see the child if they are in a distance. If somebody has family members, abroad, they are all interested to see the child, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the parents, the new parents themselves, they are so proud of their child that they want to show off, mm-hmm. what a unique, baby they have. And that's true. I mean, every child is unique, right? Mm-hmm. And and I'm a parent myself, so I know the feeling that I had when my daughter was born, right? And mm-hmm. my parents were overseas, and it was really not comfortable situation for me not to show my daughter to my relatives and to my families. Mm-hmm. So what people do, they think it's easier for them to travel with the child to show the child to everybody else. And believe it or not, that disruption, that change of environment, change of physical environment, change of climate, change of sound, change of many things can take the sense of safety away from the child.
True. Yes,
right?
that's true.
And then the child, if then depending on the frequency of that, right, the child can become more traumatized or less traumatized.
Correct.
Right, having different people, different caregivers around the child during the first 2 years can become a traumatized situation for the child.
Correct.
So the issue of trauma is so sensitive, and it is so wide area that people, when, like I said, we just automatically go, oh, the child has been physically abused, sexually abused, or what happened. But that's not the case. Trauma can start from day one as the child is born, right?
Yes.
And if the parents don't provide that sense of stability, that sense of harmony of the scheduling of the child's needs and how to attend to those needs, even change of blankets, right? That's how far psychologists go to show that how important it is to keep a harmony, a unique harmony across the first 2 years, so that the child learns to trust, the child learns to feel safe, the child can turn around and see if familiar face, whether that's a caregiver or it's a parent. As long as the child continues with that uniqueness, with just the harmony, the child learns how to trust, how to feel safe. And if that doesn't happen, then the child actually has a foundation to experience more trauma.
Yes. And so I am the proud grandfather of two new granddaughters. In next month,
and I envy that. I'm not a grandma yet, and I'm looking forward to it.
and those are two twin girls. They're fraternal twins. They're not identical twins. And those girls will be turning 2 next month. And
already?
Yeah, next month.
My goodness.
And so what I want to say about that is they each have their own personality. And as every child does, and so so one is very much more reserved, and one is much more outgoing. So when they were even littler, for the first year, one of them I would hold and look at, and she would smile at me and coo and enjoy me holding her, and enjoy looking into my eyes and my face. And the other one, when I would hold her, she would cry.
Well, but she didn't cry when I held her every time, right?
and so so what I want to say about that is what's traumatizing. She did cry at times when you held her, not all the time though. Yeah. But what's traumatizing to one child may not be traumatizing to another child.
Right.
And so it's important for you to recognize your child and what works for your child and what doesn't work for your child. And so what you were talking about before in terms of changing the environment is accurate, and you want to keep the environment as steady as you can. Now, what's going to be most important is the physical presence of the mother and the father during the first couple of years.
Right.
And so what a lot of people do is, as soon as they have the child, they hire a nanny and they go back to work. And so is that traumatizing to the child? Well, it may or may not be. Again, like I say, it depends on the child themselves. But one thing you can know is that that the child was carried for 9 months inside of the womb of the mother, and that's going to be the most comfortable place for the child because of the smell. The first sense that's developed as the child is born is the sense of smell. And so they're going to be most comfortable with the mother. And of course, if the father is around, then they're gonna have that sense of smell with the father as well,
And the sound of heartbeat.
and the sound of the mother's heartbeat. So we're talking about this because we're talking about trauma, and I wanted to say a little more right now about what trauma is, because I said trauma is the break of safety that each person feels, and people can be traumatized, of course, at any age, not just childhood, and that means they feel unsafe. Now, does it mean that every time you feel unsafe, you're traumatized? And the answer to that is yes, but it's a matter of degree.
Right.
Right. So let's say you're driving along, and all of a sudden a car swerves in front of you, and you are able to pull out of it. You don't get into an accident, but all of a sudden you have a reaction, right? And you start breathing, and you maybe you develop a cold sweat. Your heart starts racing. That was because you narrowly missed the accident. And have you been traumatized? Yes. Now, the majority of people are able to get over that pretty quickly. So it isn't that that any break in the sense of safety is going to traumatize somebody for life. But if certainly if the person has the break in safety over and over again, as with a child being with parents who are unkind or always speaking harshly to the child may develop a lack of safety over a period of time, and then may grow up with a lot of trauma experiences, and those trauma experiences will make the child feel unsafe or uneasy, and that can lead to the child, as they become older, looking for ways to feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And the looking for ways to feel better is the looking for ways to feel connected with that sense of safety, and that can come through anything that's exciting. So, for example, gambling and sex can bring out that feeling of excitement, and then can override the negative feeling inside the person. And if they start doing that on a regular basis, gambling or having sex or masturbating a lot, that can alleviate that those negative feelings and make the person feel better. But then it becomes to the point where the negative feelings are all that the person wants to do is get rid of them and change their feeling state continuously, so that it starts to become an addiction.
So I have a question here. You mentioned gambling,
Yes.
right? So is it my impression, because when I'm looking at the existing, data about this,
Mm-hmm.
I see, for example, gambling is primarily, when we talk about gambling, it's about men, right? We see that it's men that usually have, they're gathering to have an informal, poker night or any other form of play that they have. But it's mostly, guys, it's a guys' night out, right? When we talk about gambling, it's primarily we see men that they are doing it. I mean, statistic and everything focuses on men primarily.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that that's
Right.
correct.
Right.
Well, I'm not sure it's correct, because if you ever go to Vegas, you see just as many women gambling as you
Right,
do
but
men.
you know, how many women and men are in Vegas actually, right?
Well,
So majority,
there's usually many thousands.
Right.
I mean, now there's nobody,
Right.
because they've closed it down. But
that compared to the main population, we see that's a small. I mean, yes, they go there physically and play, but I'm talking this at a global area, and then globally we see that mostly when we talk about gambling, the gambling is the statistics mostly is about men, and very little we see about women. So my question is, what do you think makes that happen? Why when it comes to gambling, it's mostly men that they are going for gambling versus women?
yeah, I don't know. I mean, and I think it deserves a lot of research
Right.
if that's the case. I do think that it's the case in terms of like, men's night out and poker, that kind of thing. Um, and also sex addiction.
No, that
which-
doesn't mean that that's an addiction, right? For some, actually becomes a routine, right?
No,
Right.
no. I'm not saying that all gambling is an addiction.
Right.
Just like all sex isn't an
Isn't-
addiction.
yeah.
Just like all drinking alcohol isn't an addiction. Just like taking drugs. Taking any kind of drugs doesn't have to be an addiction either.
Right.
But what makes it an addiction is the motivation to do it is usually to escape a negative feeling state and to feel better without healthier ways of feeling better.
Exactly.
So that the addiction becomes the primary way, the thing that you're doing that makes you feel better, whether it's sex or drugs or gambling, is something that you keep doing over and over, which gives you that sense of euphoria and takes you out of a negative feeling state that you may not even realize you're carrying around.
Right.
So depression and addiction are usually go hand in hand.
Right. So I think we are close to our commercial break, and then let's come back after 3 minutes so that we can continue this amazing discussion about how addiction and trauma relate together, and then how one has the potential of become in habit of having any type of addictions as grown-ups. So more after commercial break. Welcome back to Heart-to-Heart. Dr. Robert and Dr. Mitra here. We're talking about, what causes, addictions. And of course, there is so much to say about that we cannot summarize it in one session here. And therefore, we're expanding on this talk in the future shows on Fridays. And we have the other show on Thursdays, so please don't forget to join us at 3 p.m. where we talk about another exciting subject of sex and sexuality and how to have better sexual relationship with, in our lives. So please call us 951-922-3532. That's 951-922-3532. We are happy to receive your calls. We're happy to receive your questions and comments. And then this is how we can connect better with each other. You can also visit us at our YouTube, heart-2-heart.online/YouTube. And of course, we have an archive section for our prior shows. If you are interested to visit them and to see what we have talked about, you can go to KMET SoundCloud and then go to playlist and then click on Heart-2-Heart, and then there we are.
There we are.
Right? So, Robert, we were talking about, which I just popped a question, and then we were talking about it during commercial break. Why is there more focus on men going towards gambling as an addiction or sex as an addiction versus women? Is that mean that women have less addiction in those areas, or why automatically when we talk about gambling and sex addiction, men come to our images first, right? Now, and I have looked at many research before as I was doing my own research during my PhD and postdoc, and I did come across many articles, as a matter of fact, that I remember now that with every article, majority of the focus were on guys. And now I'm questioning that. Actually, now I'm questioning that. At the time, it didn't occur to me as to why that is the case, right?
Right.
So I guess, this is an area that deserves attention for those who are doing research in addiction and trauma-related factors. it's not a bad idea to take a look at female addictions to see really what makes women not to be researched at that level, right? I'm not saying that women don't have that kind of addictions, but when it comes to female addictions, the first thing that pops is eating disorders.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So either it has to do with how male and female brain functions in terms of left brain, right brain, or is it more men function based on their ego, or women are more modest and they keep things to themselves and they don't announce it. I mean, I think this area really is something to look into. What you're talking about?
I agree, and I'm thinking about the research that you did about female sexuality, which was something that no one else had done. And you know, so
I'm not about to start a new research.
No. But I'm saying that I think in general, women haven't been as thoroughly investigated, you know,
yes,
about a lot of different issues. To me, the eating disorder thing makes a lot of sense when it comes to women, because women are so judged and looked upon on their body shape. And so becoming obsessed with your body shape, which has a lot to do with how much food you take in, would become an issue for women. And that makes sense to me. And in the sexuality, I think men are definitely given a lot more permission to be sexual. And so it would be easier for men to develop a sexual disorder, because you know, and with men, sex and power are intimately connected, and I think with women, their bodies and their body shape and power are intimately connected.
So as I'm listening to you, the theme that pops in my brain is culture. So culture, again, I'm going back to culture, right?
Yeah.
And why is that? Because, you know, it's the culture that gives that sense of safety to both men and women about how to explore their wants and desires, right? So it's a training, again, that we are exposed to from the moment of birth. Men can walk around topless, women have to pull their skirts down, right? Even though we had Twiggy come in at the, you know, early, towards mid-60s and made a revolution in females' outfits, right? But then again, it promoted the sense of women have to be skinny like that, anorexia looking, in order to be fashionable. So we see that it's a culture that shapes how men and women then there ought to be, and for men to respond to their immediate urges, it's something normal, right? So if they want to gamble as a way of numbing themselves or just to have fun, it's okay. If they want to have sex, if they don't have somebody to have sex with, they can go look at porn. So there is more availability, or it has been that way, more availability of both sex and gamble for men, so that whether that turns into an addiction or not, that's a different story, right? Not all those activities mean that men have addictions of those types. But then the sense of eating disorder for female, starting with Twiggy era, and many people may not even remember Twiggy. You and I are a couple of oldies here, so we remember that, right? When Twiggy was really an icon in fashion industry, I think I was maybe about, I don't know, 10, something like that, right? It was at the beginning of wearing mini skirts and being as skinny as bone, right? So, and that continued for women, right?
Yeah.
So we see that culture here has an influence.
It has an influence, yes. And I think it's a combination of biology and culture.
Yeah.
Because I think women their brains are different. We now know that a woman has more access to both sides of her brain. Men have more access to the left side of the brain, and it's harder for men to be in touch with their emotions. And I think that's a biological as well as a culturological
Yes,
thing.
it's as well as
Yeah.
a cultural factor.
But
Yes.
I'd like to go back to addictions for a
Right.
moment, and say, you know, the important thing about addictions is is to recognize that a person who has an addiction is struggling, and what we want to do is we want to be compassionate with anyone who's struggling in life, because there are many things in life that cause us to struggle, and nobody gets out alive, right? We're all headed towards old age if we're lucky, and oftentimes that involves illness, certainly involves death at some point, death of people around us and our own death, and so life, knowing that there's going to be an end, and knowing that our bodies are vulnerable to all different things. I mean, especially now, you know, with the COVID-19 epidemic that's going around, it's it there it we can get scared very, very easily, and that's okay that we're afraid, because we're all human and we all want to survive. However, people who have been traumatized, especially in childhood, when we're traumatized in childhood, often we repress it. We don't recognize it. Also, the other thing about being traumatized in childhood is a lot of it is what we would call normal. If Like, I was traumatized and I wasn't physically abused and I wasn't sexually abused, but I was traumatized. My mother would go into rages and scream and yell, and she would cut up things that I liked, and I never knew when she was going to go into one of her rages, and it was traumatizing. But as I grew up, I didn't recognize it as such,
Mm-hmm.
and so later on, I developed addictions. And it wasn't until I actually, in my 30s, when I was in therapy, realized that I had been traumatized, and that it had anything at all to do with the addictions that I struggled with. So it's very important for us to develop compassion for
Right.
ourselves, first of all, if we are struggling with an addiction, as millions of us are, and
Yeah, and we
for
don't know that.
and
Many of us, we don't know that we have been
we
traumatized.
don't know that we've been traumatized,
Right.
but to recognize that we are struggling with an
Mm-hmm.
addiction, and that we deserve compassion, and the other thing is is what I want to say is the denial
Mm-hmm.
that goes along with addiction is the thing that keeps us stuck,
Right.
because until we finally admit something, we can't do anything about it. We can't work on a problem that doesn't exist.
Right. So the question comes maybe for me, and also perhaps for our listeners, maybe because we don't know when we are traumatized, or how we have been traumatized, if there hasn't been a known or remembered, physical abuse or sexual abuse or car accidents or loss of job or things like that. We want to know what are the signs and symptoms that one can experience or one may experience, and then to identify, wow, so I have these symptoms, so maybe I have been traumatized at some point.
Right.
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 So I think maybe in future programs, like next week and the following weekend, you know, at 9 a.m., we can invite our listeners to listen to us so they can learn about signs and symptoms of what exactly being traumatized can feel,
Mm-hmm.
can look like, the experience, what that is, so we can help them to to recognize it, to understand it, to make sense to them, and then what does it like to feel the way that they do,
Mm-hmm.
and then how they can maybe relate it to incidents that they thought they were very much minor and they overlooked it. So I think that can be a helpful thing to offer
Yes.
in
Yes.
order for people to understand, so if I'm not liking, I don't know, to go to this area is because it reminds me of something that that I felt like uncomfortable and traumatized. And when we're talking about traumatizing, not all the traumatizing are major, right?
Yeah, and we'll talk about that also in future programs,
Right.
because we now know that there are that trauma is with a large T and with a small t,
Right.
and the things that are with a small t, such as your parent giving you a dirty look,
Right.
right? That, but people may say, well, that's no big deal, right? But it can be, depending upon the sensitivity of the child and depending upon how often it happens, and it makes the child feel unsafe. So what we're looking at, and where we started today, is the ego and the spirit, and saying that the ego is about survival, and that addictions are our attempt to reconnect with our spirit, to attempt to feel safe,
Right.
and loved and connection and
Okay.
connected.
Thank you. I really, enjoy our talk today, and I hope that this was an informative program for our listeners as well. So at this point, I'd like to invite you for next week to join us both on Thursday at 3 p.m., where we are going to be talking about sexual relationships. And also next Friday, we will continue our discussion about trauma, addictions, ego functionings, and we would like to invite you to please join us by calling us at 951-922-3532 on both shows. It's live, and then when you call us, we're not going to get you engaged in a therapy kind of a conversation, because this is not a therapy line, but we are happy to answer your question in a general fashion. And be safe, be well, and don't forget, all you need is love. Until next week, thank you, and have a blessing weekend.
Love,
and
love,
happy
love.
Mother's Day.
Love,
Happy
love,
Mother's
love.
Day.
Happy Mother's Day.
Yes.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
This is 1490 AM KMET, Banning, Beaumont, Redlands, and Palm Springs News.